The camera loved Jack Rivers the way vultures love roadkill, hungrily, completely, until there was nothing left but bones. At 7 years old, he could make audiences weep with a single glance, sell cereal with a gap-toothed grin, and charm talk show hosts with innocence that Hollywood devours for breakfast. When he vanished from a film set on that October night in 1999, the world mourned a lost child star. The police searched, the media speculated. His mother blamed director Arthur Vale. But 25 years later, as old footage flickered across forgotten screens, the truth began to surface. Jack Rivers hadn't simply disappeared. He'd been taken, offered up like a sacrifice to something ancient and hungry that feeds on talent and ambition, and some debts never die. They just wait in the shadows, growing interest until the bill finally comes due. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The grainy footage flickers to life on the old television screen. A 7-year-old boy with sandy, brown hair and bright blue eyes grins at the camera, holding up a box of cereal. "Start your morning with Captain Crunch adventures," he declares, with the practiced enthusiasm of a seasoned performer. The commercial fades to black, replaced by another clip. This time, the same boy stands on a red carpet, cameras flashing around him like lightning bugs. He waves shyly, his small hand dwarfed by the microphone thrust toward his face. Jack Rivers, everyone's favorite little actor, the entertainment reporter gushes. "Tell us about your new movie." "It's going to be really scary," Jack says, his voice carrying that distinctive lisp that made him so endearing to audiences. But the good kind of scary, like when you watch monster movies with your dad. The montage continues. Jack Rivers, in a McDonald's commercial, giggling as he bites into a burger. Jack Rivers accepting a Young Artist Award, his mother beaming beside him. Jack Rivers on late-night talk shows, charming hosts with his quick wit and innocent observations about Hollywood life. Then the footage changes. News broadcasts from 1999 fill the screen. Child star Jack Rivers has vanished from a film set in Northern California. A stern-faced anchor announces, "Police have launched a massive search effort." The television clicks off with a sharp snap. Arthur Vale sits in his dimly lit living room, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he sets down the remote. At 68, the once celebrated director looks every day of his age and then some. Deep lines etch his face like canyons, and his grey hair hangs limp and unwashed. Empty bottles crowd the coffee table, and the curtains haven't been opened in weeks. Across from him, a young woman adjusts her camera equipment. Sarah Mitchell, 29 and determined, has spent 2 years trying to get this interview. Her documentary about missing child actors had hit a wall until she tracked down Arthur's address through a private investigator. "Mr. Vale," Sarah says gently, "I know this is difficult, but Jack's story deserves to be told." Arthur's laugh is bitter and hollow. "Jack's story? You mean my failure? The boy I was supposed to protect? You were directing a film. You couldn't have known, couldn't I?" Arthur's voice cracks. "The signs were all there. The complaints from parents, the strange things happening on set, but I was so focused on making my masterpiece that I ignored everything else." Sarah leans forward, her camera still rolling. "Tell me about The Harbor's Secret. What was it supposed to be?" Arthur closes his eyes, and for a moment he's back on that set 25 years ago, the smell of salt air mixing with stage lights. The sound of children's laughter echoing through the old mansion they'd rented for filming. "It was going to be my breakthrough," Arthur whispers. "A psychological thriller about a boy who discovers dark secrets in his grandfather's seaside home. Jack was perfect for the role. He had this ability to convey terror and innocence at the same time. The camera loved him. The memory shifts, and Arthur can see it all clearly now. September 15th, 1999, the first day of filming. Jack Rivers bounces. out of a black sedan, his energy infectious even at 7 in the morning. He's wearing his costume, a navy blue sailor suit that makes him look like he stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. His mother, Patricia, follows closely behind, her face already creased with worry. "This place gives me the creeps," Patricia mutters, staring up at the imposing Victorian mansion that serves as their primary location. The building looms against the grey morning sky, its windows like hollow eyes watching their every move. "It's just old, Mom," Jack says, though his voice wavers slightly. "Old houses always look scary in movies." Arthur approaches them, clipboard in hand and excitement radiating from every pore. This is his moment, his chance to prove he can handle A-list material. "Jack, ready to make some magic?" The boy nods eagerly, but Patricia pulls Arthur aside. "I want to be clear about something," she says, her voice low but firm. "Jack's never done anything this intense before. If he gets scared or uncomfortable, misses." "Rivers, please," Arthur interrupts, his smile never wavering. "I've been working with child actors for 15 years. Jack is in excellent hands." What Arthur doesn't mention is the pressure he's under. The studio executives have made it clear that this film needs to be extraordinary. His last 2 projects flopped, and this is his final chance to salvage his career. He can't afford to baby anyone, not even a 7-year-old. Inside the mansion, the cast and crew bustle about with the organized chaos of a film set. Cables snake across hardwood floors, and massive lights transform the dusty interior into a stage. In the corner, another child sits quietly reading a book. Lila Monroe is 8 years old, with dark curls and serious brown eyes that seem too old for her face. She's been acting since she was 4, mostly in commercials, but this is her first major film role. While Jack thrives on the energy and attention, Lila prefers to observe from the sidelines. "Hi," Jack says, dropping down beside her on an old sofa. "I'm Jack. You must be Lila." She looks up from her book. Something advanced for her age, Arthur notes with approval. Smart kids make better actors. They understand subtext. "Hello," Lila says softly. "Are you nervous?" Jack considers this seriously. "A little. But the good kind of nervous, like before you go on a roller coaster." "I don't like roller coasters," Lila admits. "That's okay. Not everyone has to like the same things." Jack's natural charm is already working its magic. Even the gruff lighting technicians smile when he passes by. Arthur claps his hands, calling for attention. "All right, everyone, let's start." With scene 12, "Jack, Lila, I need you both in the library." The library set is Arthur's pride and joy. Towering bookshelves line the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that haven't been opened in decades. A grandfather clock ticks ominously in the corner, and shadows dance across the Persian rug despite the bright film lights. This is where your characters first realize something sinister is happening in the house, Arthur explains, positioning the children in front of an ornate fireplace. "Jack, you've just found your grandfather's journal. Lila, you're trying to convince him to stop reading it. I want to see real fear in your eyes." The first take goes smoothly. Jack delivers his lines with natural emotion, and Lila provides the perfect counterpoint with her nervous energy. But Arthur isn't satisfied. "Cut! That was good, but I need more." "Jack, you're not just scared, you're terrified. This journal contains secrets that could destroy your family. Feel that weight." They run the scene again and again and again. By the 4th take, both children are genuinely distressed, which is exactly what Arthur wants. Their fear feels authentic because it is authentic. Patricia Rivers watches from behind the cameras, her unease growing with each take. "Arthur, maybe they need a break." "We're almost there," Arthur says without looking away from his viewfinder. "One more time, Jack, remember, your character's entire world is crumbling. Show me that devastation." Jack nods, but there are tears in his eyes that have nothing to do with acting. He's tired, confused, and beginning to understand that the adults around him care more about the film than his comfort. During lunch break, Jack finds Lila sitting alone in what they call the green room. Actually just an unused bedroom with mismatched furniture and a broken mirror. "Do you think this place is really haunted?" Jack asks, settling beside her with his sandwich. Lila looks around nervously. "My mom says there's no such thing as ghosts." "But what if she's wrong?" Jack's voice drops to a whisper. "Sometimes I hear things, like people talking in other rooms, but when I go look, nobody's there." "Maybe it's just the old pipes," Lila suggests, but she doesn't sound convinced. "And last night, when we were filming, in the basement, I swear I saw someone watching us from the stairs. But when I turned around, it was just shadows." Lila shivers despite the warm September day. "We should tell Mr. Vale." "I tried. He said I have an active imagination and that's what makes me a good actor." Jack takes a bite of his sandwich, but it tastes like cardboard. "Sometimes I wish I wasn't good at acting. Then maybe people would listen to me instead of just wanting me to pretend all the time." As the days pass, the incidents multiply. Sound equipment picks up whispers in empty rooms. Cameras malfunction for no apparent reason. Several crew members report feeling watched, and the mansion's temperature seems to drop whenever they film emotional scenes. Jack becomes increasingly withdrawn. The bright, energetic boy who arrived on set is replaced by someone quieter, more fearful. He starts flinching when Arthur calls action, and his natural charm dims like a light bulb losing power. "I want to go home," Jack tells his mother on the 5th night of filming. "Sweetie, we've talked about this," Patricia says, though her own doubts are growing. "You signed a contract. Mr. Vale is counting on you." "But Mom, there's something wrong with this place. I keep having bad dreams, and during the day I hear people calling my name, but when I look, there's nobody there." Patricia holds her son close, feeling his small body tremble. She's noticed the changes too, how he's stopped eating properly, how he jumps at sudden sounds, how he insists on sleeping with all the lights on in their hotel room. The next morning, she confronts Arthur directly. "I'm pulling Jack from the production." Arthur's face goes white. Without Jack, there is no film. Without the film, his career is over. "Patricia, please, we're almost finished. Just 3 more days of shooting." "Look at him, Arthur. Really look. He's falling apart." Arthur does look, and what he sees makes his stomach clench. Jack sits hunched in a corner, dark circles under his eyes, speaking to no one. The boy who once lit up every room now seems to fade into the background. "I'll talk to him," Arthur promises. "We'll take it easy today. Maybe just some simple dialogue, scenes." But Patricia has made up her mind. "I'm calling his agent. We're leaving tomorrow." That night, Arthur works frantically to rearrange the shooting schedule. If Jack is really leaving, they need to film his final scene tonight. It's the climax of the movie. The moment when Jack's character confronts the dark truth about his grandfather's past. The scene takes place in the mansion's tower room, a cramped space filled with old furniture and cobwebs. Arthur has saved it for last because the setting is so perfectly atmospheric. Moonlight streams through dirty windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. "Okay, Jack," Arthur says, trying to keep his voice calm and encouraging. "This is your big moment. Your character has just discovered that his grandfather made a deal with something evil. You're angry, you're scared, but you're also brave. You're going to confront this darkness head-on." Jack nods, but his usual enthusiasm is completely gone. He looks like a small ghost in his sailor suit, pale and insubstantial. The cameras roll. Jack delivers his monologue perfectly, his voice carrying genuine terror and heartbreak, but something else is happening. The temperature in the room plummets, and several crew members later swear they see shapes moving in the shadows behind. "Jack, cut!" Arthur calls, but his voice sounds strange, distant. That was perfect, Jack. Absolutely perfect." Jack doesn't respond. He's staring at something in the corner of the room, his face white with terror. Jack! Arthur follows the boy's gaze but sees nothing except old furniture covered in dust sheets. Did you see him? Jack whispers. See who? The man in the black coat. He was standing right there watching us film. Jack's voice is barely audible. He looked hungry. Arthur feels a chill that has nothing to do with the room's temperature. There's nobody there, Jack. Just shadows. But Jack shakes his head frantically. He's been watching me this whole time, ever since we started filming, and now he's getting closer. The crew exchanges nervous glances. The atmosphere in the room has shifted, becoming heavy and oppressive. Even the seasoned professionals feel it, a presence that shouldn't be there. Let's wrap for tonight, Arthur announces, trying to sound casual. Great work, everyone. As the crew begins packing up their equipment, Jack remains frozen in place, still staring at the empty corner. Jack! Lila appears at his side, her own face pale. Are you okay? He's still there, Jack whispers. Can't you see him? He's smiling now. Lila looks where Jack is pointing, and for just a moment, she thinks she sees something. A tall figure in dark clothing, features obscured by shadow. But when she blinks, there's nothing there. We should go, she says, taking Jack's hand. Come on. But as they turn to leave, Jack stops suddenly. He gave me something, he says, his voice strange and flat. What? Jack reaches into his pocket and pulls out an envelope. It's old, yellowed with age, and sealed with black wax. None of the crew members remember seeing him receive it. When did you get that? Lila asks. Just now. The man in the black coat handed it to me during the scene. Jack stares at the envelope with a mixture of fascination and fear. He said it was important, that I needed to read it tonight. Arthur, who has been listening from nearby, feels his blood run cold. He watched the entire scene through his viewfinder. No one approached Jack. No one handed him anything. Jack, give me the envelope, Arthur says, his voice carefully controlled, but Jack clutches it tighter. No, it's mine. He said it was just for me. Before anyone can stop him, Jack breaks the wax seal and pulls out a single sheet of paper. As he unfolds it, his face goes completely white. What does it say? Lila asks. Jack's voice, when he finally speaks, sounds nothing like a 7-year-old child. It's flat, emotionless, almost mechanical. It says I have to stay, that I belong here now, that the story isn't finished. Arthur lunges for the paper, but Jack pulls it away. The boy's eyes have changed somehow. They're still blue, but there's something else there now, something ancient and hungry. Jack, give me that paper right now, Arthur demands. Jack looks at him with those strange, changed eyes. Why? You wanted me to be scared, didn't you? You wanted real fear. He laughs, but it's not a child's laugh. Well, congratulations, Mr. Vale. You got exactly what you asked for. The lights flicker once, twice, then go out completely. In the darkness, there's the sound of running footsteps, a door slamming, then silence. When the emergency lighting kicks in 30 seconds later, Jack Rivers is gone. The envelope lies on the floor, empty except for a few words written in what looks like dried blood. The boy has accepted his part. 25 years later, Arthur Vale sits in his cluttered living room, watching that terrible night replay on a dozen different screens. Sarah Mitchell has brought equipment that would have seemed like science fiction in 1999. Digital enhancers, frame-by-frame analyzers, audio isolation software that can pull whispers from static. We never found him, Arthur says, his voice hollow. 300 volunteers searched for 6 days. Police, FBI, even brought in psychics. It was like Jack just vanished into thin air. Sarah pauses the footage at the moment Jack pulls out the envelope. Even enhanced, the image is grainy, but there's something unsettling about the way Jack's face changes as he reads the paper. Arthur, look at this, she says, adjusting the contrast. Do you see anything unusual in this frame? Arthur squints at the screen. At first, he sees only what he remembers. Jack standing in the tower room, crew members in the background, old furniture casting long shadows. But then Sarah points to the corner where Jack claimed to see the man in the black coat. There, barely visible against the dark wood paneling, is a shape that definitely doesn't belong. It's tall, draped in what could be a long coat, and where its face should be, there's only shadow. But the most disturbing thing is how it seems to be reaching toward Jack as if handing him something. "That wasn't there during filming," Arthur whispers. "I would have seen it." "The human eye can miss a lot in dim lighting," Sarah explains, but her voice is uncertain. "Sometimes cameras pick up things we don't notice in real time." She advances. The footage frame by frame. The shadowy figure becomes clearer, more defined. In one frame it appears to be moving, in the next it's closer to Jack. Then, impossibly, it seems to be handing him the envelope. "This is impossible," Arthur breathes. "No one was in that corner. I had eyes on the entire room." Sarah's fingers fly over her keyboard, running the footage through different filters. "Arthur, there's something else. Listen to this." She isolates the audio track and plays it through specialized speakers. Beneath the normal sounds of the film set, crew members moving around, equipment humming, Arthur calling directions. There's something else. Whispers, so faint they're almost inaudible. "Can you make out what they're saying?" Arthur asks. Sarah nods grimly. "She's been working on this for hours. I ran it through vocal enhancement software. It's Latin, I think, but played backward." She reverses the audio and plays it again. The whispers become clearer, though still distorted. "Puer manibit, umbra famem, contractus sanguine." What does it mean? I had a linguist translate it. "The boy will stay, shadow hungers and contract in blood." Sarah's voice is barely above a whisper. "Arthur, these voices aren't coming from anyone in the room. They're embedded in the film itself, like they were recorded directly onto the magnetic tape." Arthur feels the familiar weight of guilt settling on his chest. "You think I'm responsible, don't you? That I should have seen the signs, should have protected him." "I don't think you're responsible," Sarah says carefully. "But I think someone is, and I think they're still out there." She opens her laptop and shows Arthur a series of documents: police reports, insurance claims, studio correspondence. "I've been researching everyone connected to the production. 3 crew members died within 2 years of Jack's disappearance. Natural causes officially, but all of them reported nightmares and paranormal experiences before their deaths." Arthur's blood runs cold. "Who?" "James Morrison, your cinematographer. Heart attack at 51. But his wife said he'd been seeing things. Shadow figures, faces in mirrors. He kept saying Jack was trying to warn him about something." Arthur remembers James, a quiet, professional man who never drank on set and always stayed focused on his work. The idea of him having paranormal experiences seems impossible. Then there was Maria Santos, your script supervisor. Suicide, apparently. But she left behind 20 pages of notes, written in different handwriting. All variations of the same message: "He's still in the frame." And the third, David Park, one of your lighting technicians. Car accident. But witnesses said he seemed to be swerving to avoid something in the road. Something no one else could see. Sarah pulls up another document, but here's the interesting part. All 3 of them had been storing footage from the production. Arthur sits up straighter. During filming, it wasn't uncommon for crew members to make personal copies of scenes they found particularly effective. It was technically against studio policy, but directors usually looked the other way. Where are these copies now? That's what I've been trying to find out. James Morrison's wife donated his equipment to a film school, but she kept 1 box of reels locked in her basement. She only agreed to let me see them last month. Sarah produces a metal case filled with old film reels, each labeled in James's. Careful handwriting. Most are routine, test shots, behind-the-scenes footage, alternate takes, but one reel stands out, labeled in red ink, "Do not view, J.M." "Have you watched it?" Arthur asks. "I tried, but every time I get to a certain point, the film burns or the equipment malfunctions. It's like the footage doesn't want to be seen." Arthur stares at the reel, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to help me contact Lila Monroe. She's the only other person who was in that room when Jack disappeared. If we're going to understand what happened, we need her testimony. Finding Lila proves more difficult than expected. The bright, serious 8-year-old has grown into a reclusive adult who's spent years trying to forget her brief acting career. She lives alone in a small apartment in Portland, works as a librarian under an assumed name, and has been in therapy for most of her adult life. When Sarah finally tracks her down through a private investigator, Lila's first response is to hang up the phone. It takes 3 weeks of gentle persistence before she agrees to a meeting. They meet at a coffee shop near Lila's apartment. At 33, she still has the same dark curls and serious eyes, but there's a wariness about her now, like someone who's learned not to trust the world. "I've spent 25 years trying to forget that place," Lila says, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup as if seeking warmth. "I've had nightmares about it almost every night since it happened." "What do you remember about Jack's disappearance?" Sarah asks gently. Lila's eyes grow distant. "Everything. That's the problem. I remember everything, even things that don't make sense. The way the temperature dropped in that room, the shadows that moved on their own, and Jack. Jack wasn't just scared. He was changing somehow, becoming something else." "What do you mean, changing?" His voice got different toward the end, older, like he was reading lines someone else wrote, and his eyes, they weren't a little boy's eyes anymore. They were ancient, like they'd seen terrible things. Arthur leans forward. "Did you see the man in the black coat? The one Jack claimed was watching us?" Lila nods slowly. "Not at first, but in those last few days, I started seeing him too. Always in my peripheral vision, always watching. He felt hungry, like he was waiting for something." "We've found footage that shows a figure matching that description," Sarah explains. "But there's more. We think there might be additional film that was deliberately hidden." She shows Lila the "do not view" reel, and the woman's face goes white. "I remember James filming something that night," Lila whispers, "after everyone else left. He stayed behind with his camera, said he wanted to document the room for continuity purposes, but when he came out, he looked different, scared, different." "How?" "Like he'd seen something that fundamentally changed his understanding of reality. He kept muttering about insurance footage and evidence. But when I asked him what he meant, he just said some things were better left buried." Sarah exchanges a glance with Arthur. "Lila, we're going back to the mansion. The current owners have agreed to let us film there for the documentary. Will you come with us?" Lila's response is immediate and visceral. "No, absolutely not. I can't go back there." "We understand it would be difficult. You don't understand anything." Lila snaps, her composure cracking. "That place took Jack. It tried to take me too. I can still feel it sometimes, like hooks in my mind, trying to pull me back." Arthur speaks for the first time since they sat down. "Lila, I failed Jack 25 years ago. I let my ambition blind me to what was really happening. But now we have a chance to find out the truth, maybe even find out what happened to him." "Jack is dead," Lila says flatly. "He has to be, because if he's not—" She trails off, unwilling to finish the thought. "If he's not, what?" Lila looks directly at Arthur, and he sees the terror that's been lurking behind her eyes all these years. "If he's not dead, then he's still there, still trapped in whatever took him, and going back there won't save him. It'll just give that thing more victims." Despite her fears, Lila eventually agrees to return to the mansion, though it takes another week of persuasion and the promise that she can leave at any time. The current owners, a young couple who bought the property site unseen at auction, are happy to accommodate the film crew. They've been experiencing their own strange phenomena and hope the documentary might provide some answers. The mansion looks much the same as it did 25 years ago, though time and weather have taken their toll. Paint peels from the shutters, several windows are boarded up, and ivy has claimed most of the east wall, but the basic structure remains unchanged, still imposing and vaguely threatening against the grey Pacific sky. As their car pulls up the winding driveway, Lila begins hyperventilating. "I can't do this," she gasps. "I can feel it already. It knows we're here." Arthur reaches over and takes her hand. "We'll stay together. If you want to leave at any point, we leave. No questions asked." Sarah sets up her equipment in the mansion's main hall, while Arthur and Lila explore the ground floor. Most of the furniture from the film production is gone, replaced by the current owner's modern pieces, but the basic architecture is unchanged. The grand staircase still curves elegantly to the second floor, and the library still houses thousands of dusty volumes. "It's smaller than I remembered," Lila observes, though her voice is shaky. "Everything seems bigger when you're a child," Arthur replies, but he's not entirely convinced. The mansion feels different somehow, more compressed, as if the walls have moved closer together over the years. They make their way upstairs to what used to be Jack's dressing room. The current owners use it as a guest bedroom, but the moment they step inside, both Arthur and Lila freeze. The room is exactly as it was 25 years ago. Not similar, exactly the same. The same mismatched furniture, the same broken mirror, even the same water stain on the ceiling, but that's not the most disturbing part. The clock on the nightstand, an antique piece that Arthur remembers from the original production, is running. The time reads 11:07 p.m., and as they watch, the second hand ticks steadily forward. "That's impossible," Arthur breathes. "The owners said they've never been in this room. They keep it locked because the temperature won't regulate properly." Lila backs toward the door. "We need to leave, now." But before they can move, Sarah's voice crackles through the walkie-talkie Arthur carries. "Arthur, you need to see this. I'm in the library and I've found something." They find Sarah standing in front of the ornate fireplace where Jack and Lila filmed their first scene together. She's holding an old film reel, and her face is pale with excitement and fear. "This was hidden behind a loose stone in the fireplace," she explains. "It's labeled differently than the others." Arthur takes the reel and reads the handwritten label, "Final Scene, Jack Only, 11:07 p.m. The timestamp matches the frozen clock upstairs exactly. "None of us filmed a scene at 11:07, Arthur says slowly. "We wrapped for the night at 10:30. Sarah has already set up a portable projector. The old reel feeds through the mechanism, with a soft, clicking sound that seems unnaturally loud in the quiet library. The image that appears on the makeshift screen is immediately recognizable. The tower room where Jack disappeared. But this footage is different from anything Arthur remembers filming. The camera angle is wrong, positioned as if someone was filming from inside the wall itself, and the timestamp in the corner reads 11:07 p.m., exactly when Jack vanished. In the footage, Jack stands alone in the center of the room, but he's not alone. Shadowy figures surround him, at least a dozen of them, all wearing dark robes that obscure their faces. One figure stands apart from the others, taller and more substantial. This one wears the black coat Jack described, and though its features remain hidden, there's something familiar about its posture. The robed figures begin to chant in Latin, the same words Sarah found embedded in the original audio track. As they chant, Jack's expression changes. The fear leaves his face, replaced by something else, not peace exactly, but a kind of terrible understanding. The tall figure approaches Jack and extends something toward him. The envelope. But in this footage, the exchange is clear and deliberate. Jack takes the envelope without hesitation, breaks the seal, and reads the contents. When he looks up, his eyes have changed. They're no longer the bright blue eyes of a 7-year-old. Boy, they're ancient, knowing, hungry. Jack speaks, but his voice is not his own. It's deeper, older, carrying the weight of centuries. I accept the terms of the contract. I will remain as agreed. The robed figures nod in unison, and the tall figure steps forward. For just a moment, its hood falls back, revealing a face that makes all three viewers gasp in recognition. It's Arthur himself, but not as he appeared in 1999. This Arthur is older, his face twisted with malevolent satisfaction. His eyes burn with the same ancient hunger they saw in Jack's transformed gaze. On the screen, this other Arthur reaches out and places his hand on Jack's shoulder. The boy doesn't resist. Instead, he seems to dissolve, becoming translucent, then transparent, then gone entirely. The footage continues for several more minutes, showing the robed figures filing out of the room in silence. The last to leave is the Arthur figure, who turns toward the camera and smiles. The expression is so full of malice and triumph that Sarah involuntarily steps backward. Then the film burns through, leaving only white light and the smell of melting celluloid. The three of them sit in stunned silence as the projector clicks to a stop. "That wasn't me," Arthur whispers finally. "I was never in that room after we wrapped. I went straight back to the hotel." But even as he says it, doubt gnaws at him. The events of that night have always been hazy in his memory, fragments scattered by trauma and guilt. Could he have returned to the mansion? Could he have been involved in something so horrible that his mind blocked it out entirely? Lila's voice is barely audible. "Arthur, do you remember your dreams from that time, before Jack disappeared?" Arthur nods slowly. He's never forgotten those dreams. Vivid nightmares where a voice spoke to him in ancient languages, promising him success and fame in exchange for something precious. He'd always assumed they were just manifestations of his career anxiety. "In the dreams," Lila continues, "did someone offer you a deal? Success for your film in exchange for something else?" Arthur's blood turns to ice. "How do you know about the dreams?" "Because I had them too, we all did, everyone involved in the production. A voice that spoke of contracts and prices, of giving one thing to gain another." Layla's face is streaked with tears. "I think we were all part of it, Arthur. All of us who stayed silent, who ignored the signs, who let our ambitions override our concern for Jack. We all signed that contract one way or another." Sarah has been reviewing the footage on her camera's small screen, examining it frame by frame. "There's something else," she says quietly. "Look at the timestamp again." She shows them the display. The footage runs for exactly 17 minutes, from 11:07 p.m. to 11:24 p.m., but according to all their accounts, Jack disappeared in the few seconds between the lights going out and the emergency lighting kicking in. This footage shows 17 minutes of activity in a room where we thought Jack was alone for less than a minute, Sarah explains. "It's like time moved differently in that space, or like we were watching something that existed outside normal reality." Arthur stands abruptly, pacing to the fireplace where they found the reel. "There has to be an explanation. Hidden cameras, special effects, some kind of elaborate hoax." But even as he speaks, he knows he's grasping at straws. The technology to create such convincing footage didn't exist in 1999, especially not on the budget of their small production. Lila wipes her eyes and stands as well. "We need to see the rest of the house. If there's more evidence hidden here, we need to find it before..." "Before what?" "Before whoever made that contract decides they want to collect on the rest of us." As if summoned by her words, the temperature in the library begins to drop. Their breath becomes visible in small puffs, and frost starts forming on the windows, despite the warm afternoon outside. From somewhere in the walls comes the sound of whispering, the same Latin chants they heard in the footage, but clearer now, more insistent. "We need to leave," Sarah says, already packing up her equipment. But as they turn toward the door, they find their path blocked. Standing in the doorway is a small figure in a navy blue sailor suit. Jack Rivers looks exactly as he did 25 years ago. 7 years old, sandy brown hair, bright blue eyes, but those eyes hold the same ancient hunger they saw in the footage. And when he smiles, it's not the innocent grin of a child star. "Hello, Mr. Vale," Jack says, his voice carrying impossible depth and age. "I've been waiting for you to come back." The sight of Jack Rivers standing in the library doorway sends shockwaves through the three adults. But it's Arthur who recovers first, his director's instincts kicking in, even as his rational mind struggles to process what he's seeing. Arthur's heart stops for what feels like an eternity before hammering back to life with violent intensity. The boy standing in the doorway is impossible, Jack Rivers, as he was 25 years ago, unchanged by time, wearing the same sailor suit costume from his final scene. But there's something fundamentally wrong with the image, like looking at a photograph that's been slightly overexposed. "You're not real," Arthur whispers, his voice cracking. Jack tilts his head with that familiar gesture that once charmed millions of viewers. "Reality is subjective, Mr. Vale. Isn't that what you taught us during filming? The truth depends on perspective and camera angles." Sarah's hands shake as she raises her camera, but when she looks through the viewfinder, the doorway appears. "Empty. I can't see him on camera," she breathes. "That's because he's not really here," Lila says, though her own voice trembles with terror. "Not in the way we understand existence." Jack's laugh is musical and innocent, exactly as it was in 1999, but underneath the childish giggle is something else. An echo of ancient malevolence that makes the library's temperature drop another 10 degrees. "Oh, Lila," Jack says, stepping into the room with movements that seem slightly out of sync, like a film running at the wrong speed. "Always so serious, even as a child. You understood better than the adults did. You knew something was wrong from the very beginning." As Jack moves closer, Arthur notices that the boy casts no shadow despite the bright light Sarah has set up. For filming, his footsteps make no sound on the hardwood floor, and when he passes in front of the fireplace, the flames bend away from him as if repelled by his presence. "What happened to you, Jack?" Arthur asks, fighting to keep his voice steady. "What did they do to you that night?" "They?" Jack's expression becomes confused, innocent. "Mr. Vale, you were there. You made the deal. You offered me to them in exchange for your masterpiece." "That's not true. I would never—" "Wouldn't you?" Jack's voice shifts, becoming older, more knowing. "You were desperate. Your career was failing. Your marriage was falling apart, and this film was your last chance. When the voice came to you in dreams, offering guaranteed success for one small sacrifice, you didn't hesitate." Arthur staggers backward until he hits the bookshelf. Leather-bound volumes rain down around him as suppressed memories begin forcing their way to the surface. The dreams he dismissed as anxiety-induced nightmares suddenly take on new, terrible clarity. A voice speaking to him in languages he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Promises of critical acclaim, box office success, a career that would span decades, all for the price of one gifted child who would serve a different kind of performance, an eternal one. "No," Arthur says, but even as he denies it, the memories crystallize with horrifying clarity. I couldn't have." "You signed the contract in your own blood," Jack continues, his childish voice now carrying the weight of accusation. "Right here in this room, 3 nights before filming began. You drew the symbols on the floor, lit the candles and called out to the darkness. When they answered, you were so eager to make the deal." Sarah has been filming continuously, though her camera shows only Arthur and Lila speaking to empty air. The audio, however, picks up Jack's voice clearly, along with something else. A sound like insects crawling through the walls. The footage we just watched, Lila says suddenly. It wasn't showing what happened the night Jack disappeared. It was showing the ritual from 3 nights earlier. Arthur's legs give out, and he slides down the bookshelf to sit heavily on the floor. The memories are flooding back now, unstoppable as a ruptured dam. He remembers the desperation that drove him to research the mansion's history, discovering its connection to a series of disappearances dating back to the 1800s. He remembers finding the ritual instructions in a journal hidden in the library's secret compartment. Most horrifyingly, he remembers performing the ritual with methodical precision, treating it like any other aspect of film production. Lighting, camera angles, proper pronunciation of the incantations, everything had to be perfect for the magic to work. I thought it was just insurance, Arthur whispers. A way to guarantee the film's success. I didn't think it was real. You knew it was real the moment you drew the first symbol, Jack says, crouching down to Arthur's eye level. Up close, his childish features are even more unsettling, too perfect, like a wax figure that's been given artificial life. You felt them respond to your call. You saw the shadows move and the temperature drop. You knew exactly what you were. Summoning. But I didn't know it would be you, Arthur protests. The ritual was supposed to choose someone, but I hoped. You hoped it would be someone else, Jack finishes. Someone less important to you. Maybe one of the background actors or a crew member's child. Anyone but your star. The casual way Jack delivers this assessment makes Arthur's stomach turn. Because it's true, in the darkest corners of his ambition-poisoned mind, he had hoped the entity would choose someone whose loss wouldn't derail the production. Sarah lowers her camera, overwhelmed by what she's recording. Arthur, what exactly did this ritual involve? I had to offer a child performer, Arthur says, the words feeling like razor blades in his throat. Someone with genuine talent, someone who could capture and hold an audience's attention. The entity feeds on performance, on the energy between performer and audience, but it wanted more than just a single show. It wanted someone who could perform for eternity, and in exchange, success beyond my wildest dreams. The film would be a masterpiece. Critics would hail it as revolutionary. My career would be secured forever. Arthur laughs bitterly. Of course, none of that mattered once Jack disappeared. The film was never released. My reputation was destroyed, and I spent the next 25 years in self-imposed exile. Jack nods approvingly. The entity honored its part of the bargain. Your film would have been extraordinary. You can see that in the footage that survived. Every frame is perfect, every performance transcendent, but you broke the contract when you allowed the production to be shut down. What do you mean? The ritual required completion. The film had to be finished, had to reach its intended audience. When you stopped production after my disappearance, you violated the terms of the agreement. Jack's expression becomes cold, calculating. The entity has been waiting 25 years for you to return and fulfill your obligations. Lila has been listening to this exchange with growing horror, but now she steps forward. Jack, whatever this thing has done to you, it's not your fault. You were just a child. You didn't choose this, didn't I? Jack turns those ancient eyes toward her. I could have refused. When the man in the black coat first appeared to me, I could have run. When he began visiting my dreams, I could have told someone. When he offered me the envelope that final night, I could have thrown it away. You were 7 years old. I was a performer, Jack corrects. I understood the hunger for applause, for attention, for the magic that happens when an audience loves. You. The entity offered me an audience that would never leave, never grow bored, never stop watching. In my child's mind, that seemed like paradise. Sarah has been examining the footage on her camera's playback screen. The audio levels are off. The charts whenever Jack speaks, but the visual sensors aren't detecting anything. It's like he exists on a different wavelength than normal reality. Because I'm not bound by your physical laws anymore, Jack explains. I exist in the space between performer and audience, in the moment when reality becomes story. That's why I can only appear in places where performances have occurred, why I'm strongest when people are watching. As if to demonstrate his point, Jack suddenly becomes more solid, more present. The temperature in the room plummets even further, and frost begins forming on the windows. You're here because you're filming, he continues. Your camera creates an audience, even if it's just future viewers. That gives me substance, allows me to interact with your world. Arthur forces himself to stand, though his legs shake with the effort. What do you want from us, Jack? What does the entity want? The same thing it's always wanted, completion. The film must be finished. The story must reach its conclusion. The audience must see what happens when innocence is traded for ambition. But the footage is lost. The sets are gone. Most of the cast and crew are dead. Jack smiles, and for a moment, he looks like the sweet child Arthur remembered from the set. Not all of it is lost, Mr. Vale, and death is just another kind of performance. Before any of them can ask what he means, the library begins to change around them. The modern furniture fades, replaced by the elaborate set pieces from 25 years ago. The walls shift and reform until they're standing in the exact recreation of the mansion's library as it appeared during filming. Even more disturbing, they're no longer alone. Translucent figures move around them. Crew members, actors, all the people who were part of the original production. They go about their work with the focused intensity of the living, adjusting lights, checking camera angles, preparing for scenes that were filmed decades ago. Welcome back to the set of The Harbor's Secret, Jack announces, his voice now carrying clearly to every corner of the room. Places, everyone, we have a film to finish. Among the ghostly crew members, Arthur recognizes faces that make his blood run cold. James Morrison stands behind his camera, still bearing the look of confusion and terror that marked his final days. Maria Santos hunches over her script, frantically scribbling notes that seem to write themselves. David Park adjusts lights that cast shadows with minds of their own, but it's the figure standing in the corner that makes Arthur's breath catch in his throat. A tall man in a black coat watches the proceedings with obvious satisfaction. When he turns toward Arthur, his face is revealed clearly for the first time. It's Arthur himself, but changed beyond recognition. This other Arthur radiates malevolent intelligence, his eyes burning with the same ancient hunger that now lives in Jack's childish features. When he smiles, Arthur sees his own damnation reflected back at him. "Hello," the other Arthur says, his voice a mockery of Arthur's own. "Ready to finish what we started?" Lila grabs Arthur's arm, her grip tight enough to leave bruises. "We have to get out of here now." But when they turn toward the door, they find their way blocked by more ghostly figures. These aren't crew members, they're children. Dozens of them, all wearing period costumes from different eras. Some are dressed as Victorian street urchins, others in 1920s sailor suits, still others in modern clothing. All of them share the same terrible transformation that's taken hold of Jack, innocence twisted into something hungry and eternal. "Meet my co-stars," Jack says cheerfully. "The entity has been collecting performers for over a century. We're in quite the ensemble cast now." One of the children, a girl who can't be more than 6 years old, steps forward. Her dress suggests she's from the 1890s, and her eyes hold the same ancient knowledge as Jack's. "New friends," she says in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "Are you here to join our company?" Sarah has continued filming throughout this supernatural reunion, though her hands shake so badly that the footage is barely usable. "This isn't possible," she keeps repeating. "None of this is possible." "Possibility is limited thinking," Jack explains patiently. We're dealing with forces that predate human understanding of reality. The entity that feeds on performance exists in a realm where time, space, and death are just different types of stage directions. Arthur forces himself to look directly at his doppelganger. Why show me this? Why bring us back here? The other Arthur smiles with malicious satisfaction. Because the original contract remains unfulfilled. The film was never completed. Never. Released to its intended audience. That's a debt that must be paid. But Jack is already gone. What more do you want? Jack was the down payment. The entity wearing Arthur's face explains. The contract specified that if the film wasn't completed, within the agreed time frame, additional compensation would be required. Starting with the director who made the deal, Arthur feels the walls of reality closing in around him. You want me to take Jack's place? Not replace him, the entity corrects. Join him, along with anyone else who was instrumental in breaking the contract. It turns those burning eyes toward Lila and Sarah, the co-star who could have spoken up but didn't, the documentarian who's brought the story back into the light, creating a new audience for our eternal performance. Lila steps protectively in front of Sarah. Leave them out of this. Whatever deal Arthur made, it was between him and you. Ah, but that's where you're wrong, Jack says, moving to stand beside his captor. The contract was signed with the film itself, not just with Arthur. Everyone who participated in the production, everyone who knew what was happening but chose to remain silent, everyone who could have saved me but didn't. You're all bound by the same agreement. The ghostly crew. Members stop their work and turn toward the three living humans. Their faces are expectant, hungry, as if they're waiting for the show to begin. Arthur realizes with growing horror that they're not just witnessing a supernatural encounter, they're being inducted into it. The mansion isn't just haunted, it's a theater where the performance never ends, where the boundary between actor and audience, between reality and story, has been permanently erased. What happens if we refuse? Sarah asks, though her voice suggests she already knows the answer. Refusal isn't an option, the entity explains with Arthur's voice. The contract was written in blood and sealed with ambition. The only choice is when you join the performance, not if. Jack claps his hands together with childish delight. Don't worry. Once you're part of the company, you'll understand. The hunger for applause, for attention, for the magic moment when you connect with an audience, it becomes everything. Pain, fear, regret. They all fade away until only the performance remains. The other children nod in agreement, their movements perfectly synchronized like a chorus line. They begin to sing in voices that sound like whispers and screams, a lullaby that makes Arthur's teeth ache and his vision blur. Time to choose your roles, the entity announces. The cameras are rolling, the audience is watching, and the show must go on. As the ghostly crew members close in around them, Arthur realizes that their investigation has become something far more sinister than a documentary about a missing child actor. They've walked into a trap that's been 25 years in the making, and the only way out is through a performance that will last for eternity. The mansion's walls seem to pulse with anticipation as shadows deepen and reality continues to bend around them. In the distance, Arthur can hear the sound of applause, an audience that's been waiting decades for the show to resume, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the cameras, something ancient and hungry prepares to feed once again on the dreams and ambitions of those foolish enough to seek fame at any price. The ghostly chorus of children continues their haunting lullaby as Arthur, Lila, and Sarah find themselves surrounded by the spectral film crew. But just as the entity wearing Arthur's face reaches toward them with grasping fingers, Sarah's camera battery dies with a sharp electronic whine. The moment the recording stops, the supernatural theater flickers like a disrupted television signal. The ghostly figures become translucent, their voices fading to whispers. Jack's solid form wavers, becoming see-through again. The audience connection is broken, Jack says, his voice now distant and echoing. We cannot maintain full manifestation without active observation. The entity in Arthur's form snarls with frustration. Temporary reprieve only. The contract remains binding. As the phantoms fade, the library returns to its modern state. Arthur, Lila, and Sarah stand gasping in the sudden warmth, their breath no longer visible in the air. The camera, Arthur realizes. It's like Jack said, they need an audience to gain power. When we stop filming, they lose their hold on reality. Sarah fumbles for spare batteries with shaking hands. Then we don't film. We get out of here and never come back. It won't matter, Lila says quietly. Don't you understand? We're marked now. The contract Arthur signed doesn't care where we go. Arthur knows she's right. Even as the supernatural manifestations fade, he can feel something following him, a presence that hooks into his mind like barbed wire. The weight of his guilt has become literally crushing, making each breath a struggle. There has to be a way to break the contract, he says desperately. Some loophole or condition we can exploit. Jack's voice drifts to them from somewhere beyond the visible world. Only one way, Mr. Vale, complete the film, give the entity what it was promised. But that means sacrificing more children, Sarah protests. Not necessarily, comes another voice, older, female, speaking with authority. There might be another way. They turn to see a woman standing in the library doorway. She's elderly, probably in her 70s, with silver hair and piercing green eyes. Unlike the ghostly figures they've been seeing, she casts a normal shadow and seems completely solid. Who are you? Arthur asks. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, she replies, stepping into the room. I'm a researcher specializing in occult contracts and supernatural binding agreements. I've been tracking the entity connected to this mansion for 40 years. Sarah eyes her suspiciously. How did you know we were here? The same way the entity knew, psychic disturbances create ripples. When you began your investigation and started uncovering buried footage, it sent out waves that those of us who monitor such things could detect. Dr. Whitfield moves to the fireplace where they found the hidden reel. This mansion sits on what occultists call a performance nexus, a place where the boundary between reality and fiction is naturally thin. The entity has been using this location to harvest talented children for over a century. How many? Lila asks, though she sounds like she doesn't want to know the answer. Based on historical records and missing person reports, at least 43 children have vanished in connection with this property since 1847. All of them were performers, child actors, musicians, dancers. All possessed genuine talent. Arthur sinks into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the horror he's stumbled into. And I fed Jack directly to this thing. You were manipulated, Dr. Whitfield says, though her tone offers little comfort. The entity has perfected its approach over the decades. It identifies ambitious adults connected to talented children, then uses dreams and psychological pressure to convince them to perform the summoning ritual. She pulls out a leather journal filled with handwritten notes and newspaper clippings. I've documented 17 separate instances where directors, agents, or parents made similar deals. The pattern is always the same: career pressure, supernatural dreams, a ritual performed in desperation. But none of them got what they were promised, Sarah observes. Exactly. The entity feeds on the act of betrayal itself. The moment someone sacrifices a child for personal gain, they've provided exactly the spiritual corruption it needs to maintain its hold on this realm. Dr. Whitfield opens her journal to a page covered in symbols and diagrams. However, there is a potential way to break the contract. The entity's power comes from uncompleted stories, unfinished performances. If we could complete Jack's story in a way that satisfies the narrative requirements but denies the entity it's feeding, What do you mean? Arthur asks. The original contract specified that Jack would perform for eternity, but it didn't specify what kind of performance. If we could stage a finale that fulfills the letter of the agreement while freeing Jack's spirit. A counter-performance, Lila says, understanding dawning in her eyes. Something that completes his story arc but ends with liberation instead of eternal captivity. Dr. Whitfield nods. Precisely, but it would require all of you to participate. Arthur would need to direct one final scene, Lila would need to act opposite Jack again, and Sarah would need to document it all. The entity draws power from observation, but that same power could be redirected toward breaking the binding. What's the risk? Sarah asks. If the counter-performance fails, all of you will be absorbed into the entity's collection permanently. You join Jack and the others in eternal captivity. The room falls silent as they contemplate this information. Outside, the afternoon light is fading, and shadows are beginning to lengthen through the mansion's windows. There's something else. Dr. Whitfield continues. I believe the entity has been growing stronger. The number of disappearances has increased in recent decades, and the supernatural manifestations are becoming more powerful. If we don't act soon, it may become impossible to contain. Why hasn't anyone tried to stop it before? Arthur asks. Several. People have tried. Most were absorbed into the entity's collection. A few managed to escape, but only by abandoning any children who were already marked. Dr. Whitfield's expression becomes grim. I'm the only researcher left who understands the full scope of the threat. As if summoned by their discussion, the temperature in the room begins to drop again. Jack's voice drifts from the walls themselves, no longer needing cameras to manifest. Dr. Whitfield, he says, his tone carrying new menace. Still trying to interfere with forces beyond your understanding? Hello, Jack, she replies calmly. Or should I call you by your real name, Malthus, the builder of towers, acceptor of sacrifices? The presence in the room recoils, and for a moment Jack's voice becomes purely that of a frightened child. Help me, he pleads. Please, I want to go home. But then the ancient entity reasserts control. The boy chose his fate willingly. The contract is binding across all realms of existence. Contracts can be broken, Dr. Whitfield states firmly, especially those signed under false pretenses. Arthur Vale knew exactly what he was offering, the entity snarls. His guilt proves his understanding of the transaction, but Jack didn't know, Lila interjects suddenly. He was a child. Children can't enter into binding agreements. There's a long pause, and when Jack's voice returns, it sounds uncertain for the first time. The boy was a willing participant. He accepted the envelope, read the terms, agreed to remain. Under coercion and manipulation, Dr. Whitfield presses, a 7-year-old cannot give informed consent to eternal captivity. The law is clear, the entity insists, but there's a note of desperation creeping into its voice. The ritual was performed correctly, the offering was accepted, the contract was sealed. Arthur stands suddenly, understanding flooding through him. That's it, isn't it? You're not all-powerful. You're bound by rules, limitations. And one of those limitations is that you can only take willing participants. Jack wasn't willing, Lila adds, her voice growing stronger. He was terrified, manipulated, and coerced. Any contract signed under those conditions is invalid. The mansion itself seems to shudder as the entity's rage manifests in physical reality. Books fly from shelves, windows crack, and the floor beneath their feet begins to vibrate. Silence! The voice roars from everywhere at once. The boy stays. The debt remains. The performance continues. But Dr. Whitfield smiles grimly. You wouldn't be so angry if we weren't right. The contract is vulnerable, and you know it. Hurrah has been following this exchange with growing excitement. So we don't need to risk everything on a counter-performance. We just need to prove that Jack's original agreement was invalid. It's not that simple, Dr. Whitfield warns. The entity has had 25 years to strengthen its hold on Jack. Even if we can prove the contract is invalid, breaking the binding will require enormous spiritual energy. How much energy? Arthur asks. The willing sacrifice of someone equally talented, equally innocent, equally betrayed by those they trusted. Dr. Whitfield's expression becomes grave. Someone would have to take Jack's place, at least temporarily, to provide the power needed for his release. The implication hangs heavy in the air. To save Jack, one of them would have to offer themselves to the entity. I'll do it, Arthur says immediately. This is my fault. I made the deal. I should pay the price. It won't work, Dr. Whitfield explains. The entity feeds on innocence corrupted. Your guilt and knowledge make you unsuitable as a replacement. Then, I'll do it, Lila volunteers. I was part of the original production. I have the acting ability the entity craves. Lila, no, Sarah protests. There has to be another way. But even as they argue, they can feel the entity's presence growing stronger. Night is falling, and with darkness comes increased supernatural activity. The ghostly figures are becoming visible again, even without cameras rolling. We're running out of time, Dr. Whitfield observes. The entity draws additional power from the location where the original ritual was performed. If we're going to attempt a contract breaking, it needs to be now. Arthur looks around the library where this nightmare began 25 years ago. The same fireplace where he found the ritual instructions. The same shadows where he drew symbols in his own blood. The same air that still carries the echo of his desperate prayers to forces he didn't understand. Tell us what we need to do, he says finally. Dr. Whitfield opens her journal to a page covered in intricate diagrams. The counter-ritual requires 3 elements: acknowledgement of the original deception, willing sacrifice to provide power for the breaking, and a new contract that offers the entity something of equal value. What could we offer that would be equal to a talented child? Sarah asks. The mansion itself, Dr. Whitfield explains. This location has been the entity's anchor point for over a century. If we could bind it permanently to this single building, preventing it from extending its influence elsewhere, that might be acceptable compensation. But then it would just continue taking victims who come here. Not if the mansion were destroyed. Immediately after the binding, Dr. Whitfield's plan becomes clear. Trap the entity in the building, free Jack and the other children, then eliminate the entire structure. The ghostly children have begun manifesting around them again, their ancient eyes fixed on the living humans with expressions of desperate hope. Among them, Arthur can see Jack struggling against his supernatural constraints. The other children, Arthur realizes. If we break Jack's contract, what happens to them? The binding that holds them is connected to the original ritual. Sight, Dr. Whitfield explains. If we can sever the entity's connection to this realm, all of its victims should be released simultaneously. But even as she speaks, the entity's voice booms through the mansion with renewed fury. Fools! You understand nothing of the forces you're attempting to manipulate. The temperature plummets so rapidly that ice begins forming on every surface. The ghostly figures become more solid, more menacing, and Arthur can feel the weight of supernatural attention pressing down on them like a physical force. Now, Dr. Whitfield says urgently, we have to begin the counter-ritual now, before the entity can fully manifest. Dr. Whitfield spreads her ritual materials across the library floor. Salt for protection circles, candles blessed with sacred oils, and sheets of parchment covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The ghostly children watch with expressions of desperate hope while the entity's rage builds around them like a supernatural storm. Arthur, you need to stand in the center circle, Dr. Whitfield instructs. As the original contractor, you're the focal point for the breaking. What about the willing sacrifice? Lila asks. Who's going to take Jack's place? Dr. Whitfield pauses in her preparations, her expression troubled. I've been thinking about that. The entity requires innocence corrupted by betrayal. But what if we could provide something it values even more? Such as knowledge. The entity has been bound to this location for centuries, limited in its understanding of the modern world. If someone with extensive occult knowledge were to offer themselves, Sarah realizes what Dr. Whitfield is suggesting. You're going to sacrifice yourself. Not sacrifice, trade. My 40 years of research, my understanding of supernatural binding, my ability to help the entity adapt to contemporary times. That knowledge might be worth more than a single child's innocence. Arthur shakes his head. We can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Dr. Whitfield lights the first candle, and the flame burns with an unnatural blue color. I've spent my entire career studying entities like this. If my death can free dozens of trapped children, it's a worthy end. The mansion shudders as the entity realizes what they're attempting. Windows shatter throughout the building, and the ghostly crew members become more aggressive, reaching toward the living humans with grasping hands. Begin the acknowledgement, Dr. Whitfield commands. Arthur, you need to formally recognize that the original contract was signed under false pretenses. Arthur steps into the salt circle, feeling the protective barriers snap into place around him. The supernatural pressure lessens slightly, though the entity's fury continues to build. I, Arthur Vale, acknowledge that the contract signed on September 12th, 1999, was obtained through deception and manipulation, he begins, reading from Dr. Whitfield's notes. The entity known as Malphus provided false information about the nature of the agreement and failed to disclose the true cost of the transaction. Jack's ghostly form becomes more visible, his childish features twisted with pain as the entity fights to maintain control. Arthur, he pleads in his own voice, help me go home. I acknowledge that Jack Rivers was a minor incapable of giving informed consent, Arthur continues. I acknowledge that I was manipulated into offering him as payment for a debt I didn't fully understand. The entity's roar shakes the mansion's foundations. Books explode from their shelves, plaster rains from the ceiling, and the temperature drops so low that their breath crystallizes in the air. Lies! The voice booms. The contract was willing, the boy chose his fate. The boy was 7 years old, Lila shouts back, stepping forward despite the supernatural chaos. He was scared, confused, and manipulated by adults he trusted. Dr. Whitfield begins the next phase of the ritual, spreading additional salt lines and lighting more candles. The blue flames dance wildly as invisible forces try to extinguish them. Now for the trade, she announces. I offer my knowledge, my experience, my understanding of the hidden world, in exchange for the release of all children bound to this location. But as she prepares to complete the binding, Sarah makes a sudden realization. Wait, there's another way. She holds up her camera, which has been recording everything despite the supernatural interference. The entity feeds on performance, on the connection between actor and audience. But what if we gave it the ultimate performance? What do you mean? Arthur asks. The documentary, a real, honest account of what happened here, broadcast to millions of viewers. The entity would have the largest audience it's ever had. More attention and energy than it could get from a handful of trapped children. Dr. Whitfield considers this. The idea has merit, but the risk is enormous. If the entity gained access to a television audience, not live television, Sarah clarifies, a recorded documentary that tells the complete story, including how to recognize and avoid the entity's manipulation. We'd be giving it an audience while simultaneously exposing its methods. Jack's voice cuts through their discussion, clearer now as the ritual weakens the entity's control. It could work, he says in his own childish tones. The thing that holds me wants to be seen, wants to be acknowledged. But it's also afraid of being understood. The entity's fury reaches new heights. The mansion's structure begins to crack as supernatural forces tear at the building's stability. No, the children remain. The contract stands. But Arthur can see the logic in Sarah's plan. A documentary that shows exactly how the entity operates would rob it of its greatest weapon, secrecy. Future victims would recognize the warning signs, and the performance aspect satisfies the original contract, Lila adds. Jack's story gets told to a massive audience, just not in the way the entity intended. Dr. Whitfield nods slowly. It's risky, but it might work. However, we'd need to complete the filming here, now, while the entity is partially bound by the protective circle. Sarah raises her camera, checking the battery level. I've got about 30 minutes of recording time left. That should be enough. For Jack to tell his story, and for the entity to be exposed, do it, Arthur says. Jack, are you strong enough to maintain your own voice? The ghostly boy nods, his form becoming more solid as he fights against the entity's control. I think so. The ritual has weakened its hold on me. Sarah begins filming, and immediately the supernatural activity in the room increases. The entity's presence becomes almost unbearable as it's forced to manifest for the camera. My name is Jack Rivers, the boy begins, his voice wavering but determined. I disappeared from a film set 25 years ago, but I didn't just vanish. I was taken by something that feeds on child performers, something that's been hunting kids for over a century. As Jack speaks, the other ghostly children become visible in the frame. Dozens of young faces from different eras, all wearing the costumes of their final performances. Their presence adds weight to Jack's testimony, providing visual proof of the entity's long history of predation. The thing that took me pretends to offer success and fame, Jack continues. It visits adults who work with talented children, promising them everything they've ever wanted in exchange for just one small sacrifice. Arthur steps into the camera's view. I was that adult. I was desperate for success, and when the entity came to me in dreams, I listened. I performed a ritual that I thought was just superstition, but it was real, and it cost Jack his freedom. The entity's attempts to interfere with the recording become more frantic. The camera shakes, the image distorts. But Sarah keeps filming. Modern digital equipment proves more resistant to supernatural interference than the analog technology of 1989, but here's what the entity doesn't want you to know, Jack says, his voice growing stronger. It can only take willing participants. It has to trick people into making deals, and those deals can be broken if you understand what you're really facing. Dr. Whitfield appears on camera, her journal open to pages of research. The entity is bound by cosmic laws that govern supernatural contracts. It cannot simply take victims. They must be offered willingly, even if that willingness is obtained through deception. As the documentary filming continues, something remarkable happens. The entity's grip on Jack and the other children begins to weaken visibly. Their ghostly forms become more human, less twisted by supernatural corruption. The truth weakens it. Jack realizes aloud, every person who sees this and understands what really happened here takes away some of its power. The entity makes one final desperate attempt to stop the recording. The mansion's structure groans and cracks as it throws everything it has into disrupting the camera. But Sarah's equipment, protected by Dr. Whitfield's salt circles, continues to function. The children who were taken aren't gone, Jack says directly to the camera. We're trapped, but we're still here. And now that our story is being told, we can finally, his form begins to glow with soft, natural light, instead of the cold illumination of supernatural binding. Around him, the other ghostly children start to fade, but it's a peaceful dissolution, not the violent erasure they've feared. We can finally rest, Jack finishes, smiling with the innocent joy Arthur remembers from their first day of filming One. By one, the trapped children vanish, their spirits finally free to move on. Jack is the last to go, but before he fades completely, he looks directly at Arthur. "Thank you for finishing the story," he says. "And Mr. Vale, next time, just believe in your own talent. You don't need to make deals with monsters to create something beautiful." As Jack disappears, the entity's presence in the mansion collapses like a deflated balloon. The temperature returns to normal, the supernatural pressure lifts, and the building stops its ominous creaking. Dr. Whitfield checks her instruments, all of which show normal readings for the first time since they arrived. "It's over," she announces. "The binding is broken, the children are free, and the entity has been banished." Sarah lowers her camera, the recording complete. "Do you think it will stay gone?" "As long as people know the truth about what happened here," Dr. Whitfield replies. "Knowledge is the best protection against supernatural predation." Arthur walks to the window and looks out at the mansion grounds. In the fading twilight, he could swear he sees a small figure in a sailor suit waving goodbye from the edge of the property. But when he blinks, there's nothing there except empty lawn and gathering dusk. 6 months later, Arthur sits in a small cafe in Los Angeles, watching Sarah's documentary, The Harbor's Secret, A True Story, play on the mounted television. The film has become a sensation, not just for its supernatural content, but for its unflinching examination of how ambition can corrupt even well-meaning adults. The documentary has had exactly the effect they hoped for. Several other cases of missing child performers have been connected to similar supernatural phenomena, and increased awareness has led to improved safety protocols on film sets involving children. Arthur's phone buzzes with a text from Lila. "Watching the documentary again. Still can't believe we survived it. Coffee next week?" He smiles and types back his agreement. Lila has started a foundation that provides mental health support for child actors and their families. She's also returned to acting, but only in productions that meet strict ethical standards for the treatment of young performers. Dr. Whitfield approaches his table, looking healthier than she did during their harrowing experience at the mansion. Her research into supernatural phenomena has gained new credibility since the documentary's release, and several universities have offered her academic positions. "How are you holding up?" she asks, settling into the chair across from him. "Better every day," Arthur replies honestly. "I'm directing again. Small projects, nothing ambitious, but they're clean. No deals, no shortcuts, just honest work." On the television, the documentary reaches its climax, the moment when Jack finally tells his story and the trapped children are freed. Arthur still gets emotional watching it, seeing the peace that crosses Jack's face as he finally moves on. "Any word on the mansion?" he asks. Dr. Whitfield nods. "The new owners had it demolished last month. They're building a children's park on the site, complete with a memorial to Jack and the other victims. Something tells me he would have liked that." Arthur thinks about the boy who just wanted to make people happy through his performances. A playground seems like the perfect tribute. A place where children can be children without the pressure of adult ambitions corrupting their innocence. "There's something else," Dr. Whitfield continues. "We've been getting reports of similar entities operating in other locations. The documentary has encouraged victims and survivors to come forward. Are you planning to investigate?" "Sarah and I are developing a series, Hidden Contracts, documenting supernatural predation in the entertainment industry. We think there are dozens of cases that have been covered up over the years." Arthur considers this. "If you need a director who understands the subject matter, Dr. Whitfield smiles. "I was hoping you'd offer. Your experience gives you insight that other filmmakers lack. And Jack seemed to trust you, even after everything that happened." The documentary ends with footage of the children's park being built where the mansion once stood. The final image is of a bronze plaque dedicated to Jack Rivers and the other young victims, with an inscription that reads, "Their stories live on, their spirits are free." As Arthur walks home through the quiet streets of Hollywood, he reflects on how much his life has changed. The guilt that once consumed him has been replaced by a sense of purpose. He'll never be able to undo what happened to Jack, but he can help prevent it from happening to others. His phone rings, Sarah calling with news about their next investigation. As he answers, Arthur catches his reflection in a store window and realizes he looks genuinely happy for the first time in 25 years. "Hello, Sarah. What have you found?" A case from the 1980s. A children's theater group in Chicago. 7 kids vanished during rehearsals for a production of Peter Pan. The theater closed down, but recently, Arthur listens to the details, already planning their approach. The work will be dangerous, emotionally taxing, and psychologically demanding, but it's also necessary, important, and ultimately healing. As he heads home to prepare for their next case, Arthur thinks he sees a familiar figure walking ahead of him on the sidewalk, a small boy in a sailor suit. But when Arthur quickens his pace to get a better look, the figure turns a corner and disappears. Arthur smiles to himself. Whether it was really Jack or just his imagination doesn't matter. What matters is that somewhere, a 7-year-old boy who loved to perform is finally at peace, and for the first time in 25 years, so is Arthur Vale. What price would you pay for your dreams, and how would you sleep at night knowing a child paid it instead? Like and subscribe for more stories that explore the darkness hiding behind Hollywood's brightest lights.